Hello and welcome to Press Corner here on TVP World with me, Hashim Kumar. On Press Corner, we explore the hot issues of the day with esteemed colleagues in the media. All perspectives are heard and we leave you, our audience, to make your own minds up. As we near the end of 2024, we thought that it would be a good idea to do a review of the topics that have dominated our headlines over the last 12 months and speculate on what awaits us in the coming year of 2025. Today, I'm joined by Alexandra Karashinska. Welcome.
Hello.
From Forbes Women. Jacek Żakowski, columnist, Collegium Civitas. Welcome, Jacek.
Hello.
And Tomasz Kasprowicz, Editor-in-Chief, Res Publica Nova.
Morning.
Welcome. So we start with the war in Ukraine, where Russian forces have gained control of an additional 0.5% of Ukrainian territory since the start of the year, and Ukrainian units made a limited incursion into Russia's Kursk region in August. The economic and human tolls of the war have mounted hugely for both sides. Add to this the Trump effect, where the president-elect has committed to ending the war, although probably not in the 24 hours that he initially mentioned. Are we in stalemate, and is there an end in sight? Before we get into that conversation, let's watch a short video clip.
Russian forces have gained control of an additional 0.5% of Ukrainian territory since early 2024, underscoring the slow but persistent advances on certain segments of the front. Fighting has been concentrated heavily in eastern and southern Ukraine. Ukrainian forces launched a series of counterattacks in the Donetsk and Zaporizhia regions during the summer and early autumn, aiming to roll back Russian gains. Moscow's forces still managed to extend its control marginally in 2024 by occupying a handful of settlements near the previously static front. In a development that caught many by surprise, Ukrainian special operations units made a limited incursion into Russia's Kursk region in August. The operation was designed to disrupt Russian supply lines and demonstrate Kyiv's capacity to extend the conflict beyond Ukraine's borders. Russian state media reported that the Kursk incursion prompted emergency troop redeployments and a flurry of defensive measures along key border areas. In the autumn, North Korean troops were deployed to the region to win back the territory, to no avail.
The enemy is conducting intensive assaults in the Kursk region. North Korean units are being actively engaged. DPRK mercenaries have already suffered big losses.
Beyond the territorial changes, the economic and human toll of the war in 2024 has mounted for both sides. Russia's military spending rose by at least 10 to 15% compared to 2023. The sudden focus on defending Kursk alone is believed to have cost several billion rubles in emergency funds. Kyiv has also struggled under the financial burden of a protracted war, much of which it funds through Western aid and loans. Civilian infrastructure continues to be a target for missile and drone strikes, requiring billions in reconstruction resources. As the year draws to a close, the conflict shows no sign of resolution, at least on the battlefield. With Russia holding parts of eastern and southern Ukraine and devoting considerable resources to border defense in Kursk, we are awaiting decisions made at a future negotiating table.
Okay, so Jacek, I'll start with you. 0.5% of additional territory since the start of the year. There seems to be a bit of a stalemate in this war. Would you agree?
Well, this is not so important. I mean, much more important is how difficult, how deep this destroy has been done to, and how much harm has been done to Ukraine. Electric system destroyed almost totally. Tens or perhaps even hundreds of thousands of people injured and killed. This is a massive move of Ukrainians abroad. Yes, it seems that this war is lasting too long, and it's not very fruitful for Russia, but it's very harmful for Ukraine, means for us. Because, as I understand it,
right.
Ukraine is part of a Western community. And the fact that we cannot prevent it from this harm says something about our position on the global scene this time.
Right. Well, is it our role to prevent something like, can we prevent something like this happening?
Very difficult question, but, you know, we definitely should be able to prevent, as a colleague said. It says that the 2024 was a reminder that we are living in a very unstable world, and looking at 2025, we see that the world might be even more disruptive, given the Trump and his administration in the White House. So coming back to your question about Ukraine, I think that we see how devastated this last year has been, that people are very tired, Ukrainians are really exhausted. And I've just checked the recent Gallup survey, and it really shocked me because more than half of Ukrainians are really willing to lose ground, to accept the losses of South Donetsk and Crimea, but they want peace as soon as possible.
Land for peace.
They really are desperate. As you mentioned, their energy system is almost collapsed. It's been attacked throughout the war, throughout the last year, and there are several constant blackouts. People are just living without electricity. There's a lack of water. There's the whole economy is actually collapsed. I talked this year with head of editor-in-chief of Ukrainian Forbes, and he says basically without Western money, without Western help, the economy will be bankrupt. So yes, and the influx of refugees, meaning that the population of Ukraine is shrinking. And as I've learned, the Ukrainian army is struggling with mobilization. They need right now 106,000 recruits, soldiers, and they are not able to find them. So the situation is really desperate, and we probably don't feel it that way because Polish media and European media are not covering the war as it was before, as extensively. But I have friends in Kiev, I have friends in Ukraine, and what I really heard from them firsthand is really the gloomy outlook. People do not believe that the world will end successfully. They just need, many of them say, we need a ceasefire right now.
Prepared to compromise. Now, Tomasz, I mean, this seems to be a situation where Russia's kind of leading, in a sense. It does seem to have proportionately, more resources available to throw into the front lines, and it's just a matter of time before we get to the situation that Alexandra has just described, where people are so fed up with it they'll say, "Okay, look, we'll give up anything to stop this war." What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we should not forget Russia is also exhausted with this conflict. It's not that it's only Ukrainians that are suffering. And it is a bit of a stalemate, of course, on the front line. That's one part. It's also impossible to start the peace talks right now because A, everybody waits for Trump. B, it's unacceptable for Russia at this point due to the Kursk incursion, because Putin is saying that Ukraine should accept the front lines. Well, that would mean they will have to accept the front lines in Kursk, which is not acceptable for Russia. Russian economy is actually doing worse than Ukrainian economy. And of course, without the Western help, it would collapse. But the problems there are also mounting. And there is a lot of Russian propaganda around trying to explain to us that everything is going according to plan and everything is fine, but it clearly is not. And the question is, who can maintain this situation longer?
The Russian economy isn't doing as well as perhaps they're presenting. What are the main weaknesses in your opinion?
Well, there are a couple of them. First of all, of course, you have exhaustion of the labor force. Of course, people going to the front lines and then partial mobilization, and of course, the huge exodus from Russia and migration, especially the higher qualified people. So this is the big problem. Second problem is inflation, of course. We have rather big tense between the central bank of Russia and Nabulina that's trying to raising the interest rates, which are the record high, while the inflation is still rampant. On the other side, the economic policy is clearly indicating that this level of interest rate is unsustainable because the companies are unable to repay any kind of loans with 25, 26, 29% interest rate, which is grinding the economy to a halt, and also is impacting the citizens because they are supposed to repay their loans, and all of those programs that were supposed to shield them from the high interest rates expired. So we have massive bankruptcies in Russia.
May I just add? I agree with all that you said, that the Russian economy is not so great, and the people in Russia, as part of the Russian society, is also against the war. But we should not put our hopes on the fact that Russia Russian society might be exhausted, or the Russian economy is not so doing well, because from what we hear publicly from Russian diplomacy, their goal is to destroy the sovereign state of Ukraine, and this is the goal of the war. And Putin will not stop until he gets to this goal. So, I think we as Western allies and allies of Ukraine should not put hopes in...
We can't depend on the people,
on Russia.
On people of Russia actually kind of putting pressure on Putin to stop because of the economic conditions. Well, that's perhaps a fair point, but you also have the oligarchs, don't you, Jacek, on whom Putin really relies quite a lot, and they are suffering as a result, of the sanctions, but also in terms of the economic conditions that they're facing in Russia. Do you think they might influence Putin?
Well, I don't have any hopes they will influence Putin effectively. If some of them tries to influence Putin, then he dies. This is a very short story. Putin is the major oligarch of Russia.
Right.
He controls other smaller oligarchs.
The Tsar.
So we shouldn't hope. But what I think is that when Putin will see Russian people suffer enough to try some reactions, different kind, he will probably be more willing to discuss about the peace. And this is the only hope. The level of popular suffering. Russians can stand with pretty big level of suffering, much higher than in Western Europe, on the USA, right, and so on. But still, there is some limitation.
Right. Okay. Okay. Now, Alexandra mentioned, Trump and the possibility of some kind of disruption. Now, Trump, as I said earlier, is committed to stopping this war, and there is a line of thought which says that Putin is trying to conquer as much Ukrainian territory as possible before Trump comes in, so that he comes to the negotiating table from a position of strength. Would you agree with that line of thought, Jacek?
Probably that's the truth. But, well, Trump is not the politician who is very strongly connected to his own words. He changes opinions, and so we should. It's like 100 promises of Donald Tusk in Poland, for example. This kind of politicians, they don't follow what they say. They just change what they say very easily. So what I think is it's possible that if border policy of the United States, migration policy, will not be successful, then Trump will be determined to have a success on international relations. This means he will be more tough on Russia, because it's the easiest way to have a success on international relations. It's much easier than have success in international relations towards Canada, Mexico, European Union, and so on. Russia is simply, as you said, is simply weak.
Right. Okay. So Russia is going to be a political tool that Trump is going to use. But some might say, well, Trump does have a record of damping down on conflicts. You think about the Abraham Accords in the Middle East, for example. So would you agree that Trump is more committed to peace in Ukraine than Jacek seems to suggest?
No, not really.
Okay.
Trump will do whatever benefits Trump.
Okay.
It seems that for now he's floating some ideas, and Putin is shooting them down one by one. And the question is whether Putin counts on the fact that actually the Putin will try to follow through and say, I will do it in 24 hours and then agree to anything. Or he may actually achieve the opposite goal of enraging Trump, which is not that hard to do. Well, we remember that on the day Trump won, the state Russian TV actually broadcasted in the prime time naked pictures of the First Lady, which shows that they are in rather confrontative approach to Trump, which is somewhat surprising. So Putin is a wild card. We don't know what he's going to do, if he's going to double down with the help to Ukraine, annex Greenland, or send military to Mexico, or maybe do something completely
Or make Canada
different.
the 51st state.
Yeah, it could be also a case.
Okay, so anything is possible. Sorry.
Agreeing with the wild card, I would say we know something in regard to Ukraine and Russia, because we hear some remarks, but also there's leaks from the future administration, and we know what General Keith Kellogg plan, the special envoy to Ukraine and Russia, says. So probably what is on the table, that Kellogg is set to prepare a stage for the future negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. And where we start at the beginning of this conversation is there will be a freezing of the front lines. Also, some kind of bilateral guarantees of security for Ukraine. Probably no mentioning NATO membership at all. Which is very bad for Ukraine. And also maybe some kind of similar to Israeli solution. So supplying Ukraine with arms, with weapons from United States, helping build security facility, defense industry on site in Ukraine, so that Ukraine could defend itself.
So making Ukraine too strong to attack?
At least deterrent enough, but also, as we know, the Trump previous administration was also very transactional. They are not willing to pay for the ammunition or equipment or the arms. So basically, they would expect Europe to pay for the defense. So this is probably something on the stage. And as you said, Trump is really difficult to read what he will do. I think what's inside his head, he wants to have a deal done and then probably imagine himself getting the Peace Nobel Prize somewhat in the future. But this is very, very risky. And of course, Russian diplomacy, as much as I don't like them, they are very good. So unfortunately, they will play the weaknesses of Trump administration and Trump's himself.
Understood. Okay, so Jacek, 2025, do you agree with Alexandra's prediction that we're going to have a frozen conflict and we're going to have security guarantees in Ukraine, and that Europe will need to step up to the plate a bit more and take responsibility for this coming to pass?
I'm not sure it's so short perspective. I'm not sure the war will end in 25. That's because Russia is ready to continue. It's capable, and we have no means to force it to withdraw. And as we remember, Trump first term, he's very active on the very beginning, and then he's not so much interested in games in which he's not winning, like with North Korea, for example. Very much engaged and then put it on side. Leave it and let's engage some in different place. This is transactional, of course, but what about relations? America needs desperately relations with other strong countries, with other powers, which means it's not only angry with Trump is not only angry with Europe, but he's also desperately needing Europe as an ally, because United States is too weak now. It's not the America we used to know when we were children.
Yeah,
it's
okay,
a small, poor, relatively poor country.
What do you think is going to happen in 2025, Jacek?
I think we will observe some kind of economic wars with China, especially.
China and Europe?
Perhaps with Europe, but Trump is desperately needing cooperation of Europe against China. So he will not attack us openly.
Right.
He will try some better deals,
right,
if it's possible.
So Trump will be transactional with China?
Not only. He's also relational.
Yeah.
Relations, strong, long time lasting relations with Western countries like Europe, Australia, Canada.
Right.
He's desperately needing this cooperation.
Those. Understood. Okay, I'll come back to you in just a second for your predictions, but we do need to move on to our next topic. So, funny enough, it's on Trump and the election. In a dramatic turn of events, Donald Trump secured the US presidency in the 2024 election. This is, of course, his second victory, the first one being in 2016. The win has prompted a wave of introspection in the Democratic Party. What turned the voters so decisively off voting for them? Well, let's watch this little video and then we'll take your opinions.
The upset, while surprising to some observers, followed a turbulent year in American politics. The early months of 2024 saw President Joe Biden grappling with lingering economic uncertainties and international crises that dampened his public approval figures. Despite the administration's legislative accomplishments, Biden's age and health remained constant talking points among opponents. Rumors swirled throughout spring and summer that he might step aside, clearing the way for Kamala Harris to mount a reinvigorated campaign for the White House. The race for the Oval Office took a dark and shocking turn this summer when former President Donald Trump faced his first assassination attempt at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. 2 months later, another attempt at Trump's life was thwarted before a shot could be fired at a golf resort in Florida. In late August, following an abysmal performance in a televised debate, Biden ultimately announced he would not seek re-election, setting the stage for Harris to accept the nomination at the hastily organized Democratic National Convention. The switch came late in the cycle, leaving little time to mount an all-out national effort against the Trump team. As Election Day approached, it became clear that Donald Trump's ability to galvanize his base was proving more robust than pollsters had predicted. Now, Democrats are facing one key question. What if Joe Biden had stepped aside sooner? Some party insiders insist that an early handover could have allowed Harris to build national momentum, refine her campaign platform, and better connect with the broader electorate. Others argue that no timing would have guaranteed victory, given the deep ideological divides in the country and the potency of Trump's populist message.
Tomasz, start with you. So, what did the Dems do wrong and what did Trump do right?
Oh, everybody would like to know that.
Well, what do you think?
Well, First of all, definitely what we can say is that this time, for sure, Americans wanted more Trump. And they knew what they are getting into. Yeah, it's not the first time you could say they want to change it, they didn't know what they are getting into. They want more Trump. And this clearly correlates with the perceived problems of US, one of them being migration, which is to a degree a problem created, but to a degree also a real problem. And that's something the American people wanted the focus to be on. And this was clearly something that was the most important, and that's why we've seen the landslide victory of Trump, far beyond what we might have expected.
So people didn't think that the Dems were ready to address the migration issue. Is that what you're saying?
And basically, to a degree, they've shown that, especially at the very beginning of the Biden administration, when a lot of Trump regulations were overturned, some of them rightly so. And the problem on the border was actually mounting while the Democratic Party was trying to pretend there is no problem at all. That's probably not the best strategy overall. The handover of the presidency candidate, of course, there are many narratives now. That's just too late. Some would say too early, because the highest support from Harris was just after the handover, not later on. So the question was whether actually this should maybe have happened later. But the point is that Kamala Harris wasn't that strong of a candidate, and she couldn't read the emotions of American people as well as Trump could. And of course, the Trump propaganda campaign is really, really effective, and really getting very well into the emotions. And that's what Harris was definitely missing in her campaign. Clearly, the abortion issue that was the main focus of the Democrats was important, but not that important, especially that many states already regulated it on the state level, so it wasn't mobilizing the electorate as much as possible. Could have they won the elections? Well, from today's perspective, you can say that probably not. Mm-hmm. But if you asked me in the summer, it looked like a toss-up.
You're right. It seemed close in the summer. Alexandra, so okay. Yeah.
All the reasons the Democrats failed the elections are true, but I would say on the higher level, it obviously seems that those populist ideas of Trump won because the society wanted change. And the change against elites, against the Washington, against rich, educated elites of white elites of United States, and the reasons were the same as it was in the first term of Trump. So we have this great book. Strangers in their own land. Yes, so they are the sociological research of why poor people in the United States are voting for a multimillionaire who is promising them many things but never delivering any of it, and actually is playing against their interests. So we see the same movement, the same problem here in Europe when populists, right-wing nationalists are winning electorates in France.
Yes, but
in many countries, also in Poland, we've been through this. And so people really want a change, but definitely the populists will not bring the outcome that the people would like to have.
If we go back to America, then clearly what the other side of what you just said is that people didn't believe that the Dems had brought the changes they wanted, and they wanted a change from them. They were dissatisfied with the Dems' performance.
Absolutely, and Democrats and also liberal elites in the West are not delivering. I mean, they are not changing the politics in a way that society is expecting of them.
Right.
And I think also I see the weakness of the left here, definitely, that they are not able to really deliver a policy that people could believe in and could be inspired by that.
Right.
So
Jacek, I'd like to bring you in on this. are we saying then that the Dems seem to be tone deaf? I mean, the population was saying, well, OK, abortion is an issue we want to talk about, but there are other things like border controls, which the Dems didn't seem to want to talk about, even though it was such an emotive issue. Do you think they've just been tone deaf and should have changed their strategy earlier?
Difficult question. In my opinion, the disaster happened after Obama. There was a fantastic left-wing candidate, Bernie Sanders, offering to Americans substantial change. They are asking for since the mid-90s. And remember, Obama won with a slogan, change. This is the substance. If you don't offer change in these times, then you may win incidentally, but you will lose. And this happened in America. And I'm very much afraid this will happen in many European countries in coming years. There are Bernie Sanders in different countries. But look what's going on in Europe now. Germany defending the consensus, the Washington consensus in a kind, very weak, very weak in Germany, but still, is losing. And what happens in Spain, which is the champion? Why? Because its policy, social democratic policy of the Spanish government, is anti-Washington consensus rules. This profits Germany 0.2% of growth, Spain 3.2 or something like that. This is the change. This is what people ask for, and I think I'm looking for Trzaskowski in Poland, for example.
Right.
He's absolutely not willing to say the word change. He is defending, he's a very good candidate, very talented politician, but he's unable to separate from what his party have been doing for 10, 20 years.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll come to the Polish elections if we have time later. But yes,
I just one point about that, because we have to discuss what kind of change. That's an important issue. Bernie Sanders mentioned. Almost anything and everything that Bernie Sanders represents is something that is highly under attack from the majority that elected Trump. So
Right.
it doesn't seem like it's any change that it's very well received by the
Not
electorate.
quite, because he's supporting control of migration, for example. This is the difference between him and Biden. Big difference.
Yeah, but
but
let's
I
say
think the economic policies are slightly very different.
anti-walk.
Anti-woke, that's one thing, but also universal health care and other issues like this, which is anathema in United States,
Right.
for example.
Right.
So this is not about any type of change. And even going into the Spanish example, in Spain, we have 40% unemployment among youth due to the mentioned policies. So this is a difficult issue in general, what kind of change. And part of defending what's there is that some of the changes those populists present are actually against the values of democracy. And that's part of it why some parts of the political spectrum are not willing to embrace those changes.
But I mean, would you agree that the value, you mentioned the values of the Democrats, it was certainly, to many people, Kamala Harris's values didn't come across very strongly, either. And Biden was, he was absent a lot of the time. And when he took part in that debate, he had the opportunity to put forward his values, and that didn't work out terribly well for him. So perhaps there's a communication issue here, and the right people. Now, I also want to talk about the shift. I'll stay with you, Tomasz. Between the black vote. Still, 80% of the black vote went to the Democrats, but the Republicans increased their share from 10 to 20% of the black vote. Does that surprise you? Why did this happen?
The shift in the black vote is there, but what's even more interesting is the shift in Latino vote, which is much more prominent.
Right.
And they are shifting Republicans. And
why do you think that is?
Against their own interest.
Well, this is because of several reasons. It was Ronald Reagan said that Latinos are Republicans waiting to find out they're Republicans. Latinos are very conservative from the point of view of the values that they have. And of course, the first generation there votes Democratic because of the migration issue. But when that's the second, third generation, now they feel American, and they suddenly are against migration
so
because
the younger generation of Latinos that made the difference. Would you agree?
It's so complicated. I think there will be, after 10 years, many research on that election and why it happened, what happens. But I would say it's also important that we have a real crisis in media and communication in society. So maybe some electorates, and I believe it's true, basically are uninformed and uneducated. And the election takes place on internet, on social media mostly, and the algorithms are playing on emotions and not on facts and figures, and not on, people are not deciding on their best interests, but they decided on, random emotions and fears actually. And people like Trump and his acolytes are very good at using those tools of fear and anxiety and anger. So, we have, right now I've read a report of Reuters Foundation, the digital news report 2024, and the report shows that the major source of news around the globe is social media right now, and that the so-called traditional media, even digital media, are not even third, not even second, they are third.
Right.
The second is search. So first of all, people get news or their information and knowledge from social media, governed by algorithms. Secondly, they search something online, and only third are media.
Will they go to mainstream media?
So I think this is also, the technological revolution is also playing into the development of populism.
The whole environment is changing. Now, before we move on to the last topic, we've only got a few minutes. Your prediction for 2025 in terms of what Trump will do next year?
I don't think a crystal ball of this magnitude was ever invented.
I'm sure you have one. Thomas. Go on.
Well, definitely what we can say almost for sure is the trade war with China.
Right.
Slapping some tariffs on Europe as well, but not too much agreeing with what you said. Trump will not want to antagonize Europe, so that's for sure. There will be attempt at de-escalating what's going to happen in Ukraine. I would bet
only an attempt, not a solution.
Yeah, I don't think it will be successful for many reasons.
Okay.
So I expect the war to go on in 2025, at least through the second part of it. And if you ask me about the presidency, the main word is security. And economic security as the main issue, and I think that's what we should actually focus on.
Okay, so we're all on record now. 12 months from now, we'll come back and see how well we did. Let's move on in the last few minutes that we have to our third topic. As Poland prepares to take the reins of the European Union's rotating presidency on January the 1st, with a vision focused squarely on strengthening the bloc's security, measures and advancing its enlargement goals is becoming clearer. The first half of the year will also coincide with the presidential campaign in the forefront of Poland's political scene. How do we expect the EU to be influenced by the Polish presidency, and what are the dynamics of the internal presidential election likely to be? Well, let's have a look at this quick video and we'll come back to you for some comments.
And that scene is rapidly taking shape ahead of the vote next year. Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski, representing Prime Minister Donald Tusk's Civic Coalition, emerged victorious in his party's primary on November 23rd. The following day, the main opposition Law and Justice Party announced it would back historian Karol Nawrocki as its candidate. Both moves set the stage for what many analysts predict will be a closely watched showdown in the yet-to-be-scheduled May election. According to recent polls, other contenders stand little chance of taking the country's top job, with the likely outcome being a runoff between Trzaskowski and Nawrocki in late May or early June. A Trzaskowski victory would have immediate implications for Poland's governance. Since taking power over a year ago, Tusk's administration has found it difficult to push its legislative agenda past President Duda, an ally of the previous Law and Justice-led government. Warsaw is set to take over the presidency of the EU Council on January 1st. Earlier this month, Radosław Sikorski emphasized that Warsaw would strive to position itself among the EU's most influential member states, its Big Five, during its 6-month tenure at the helm. Poland also hopes to leverage EU funds for defense infrastructure projects, including the East Shield initiative, designed to enhance the security of the bloc's eastern flank.
Okay, so in the last few minutes we have left, I'd like to ask your predictions in terms of the influence that Poland is going to have on European Union policy in the role of President of the EU Council. Jacek?
Well, I hope this will be influential presidency, but there will be election in Germany. There will be coming election in France. So two major players will be under process of change. It will be very difficult to come to any conclusion in these circumstances. So I don't expect much will happen, and strong anti-Polish influence of new American administration will be also very important and limiting our possibilities.
Well, in terms, very quickly, of the defence, strengthening EU defence and so on, any impact?
Without new German government, without new French government, impossible to decide.
All right, well, we shall see. Alexandra.
So 3 words for 2025: Trump, tariffs, and probably global instability. And from a Polish perspective, European Union, definitely some kind of deal with the United States concerning tariffs and trade.
Between the EU and...
And of course, because as far as I know, I see Europe is preparing to negotiate with Trump administration the terms before the trade war starts. And I hope it will not come to that. And the second, possible negotiations with 2 wars going on in Middle East and in Ukraine. And as a colleague said, probably none of it will be resolved permanently. In a sense, we might get into some kind of ceasefire, but it might not be, unfortunately, permanent.
But briefly, in terms of Poland's influence as President of the Council, what do you think, how will they move the needle?
I hope the Polish presidency will be good for Ukrainian cause, in the sense that we will promote the admission, Ukraine admission to EU. Of course, it will not happen probably in a decade, but at least we will move it forward. In sense, for example, to get the free trade agreement with EU, Ukrainian EU agreement. So I hope this will bring...
Okay, so concrete steps in terms of bringing Ukraine into the European fold a little bit more economically, at least. Your thoughts?
Well, there's always elections incoming in the European Union somewhere.
That's true enough.
But we are suffering from lack of clear and strong leadership in EU.
Right.
That's for the last couple of years. There were hopes rising with Tusk, but I don't think he has a lot of mess to deal with at home right now. What we can see more on an agenda is probably some kind of common defense and spending. This is something that Germany is against, as usual.
Right.
But we may see some more discussion about how to even out the uneven burden of the security problems that we are facing.
Security problem in terms of getting more countries to invest more in security of.
Yeah, but also there are countries that are facing very little security issues at all.
Right.
Look, Portugal,
right.
And there are countries like Estonia that face far more than they can bear, and maybe the European solidarity should be aimed at helping out in this dire circumstances.
Okay, understood. Well, unfortunately, the clock has beaten us. Again, as always, there's so much more to talk about, but thank you all very much for joining us on this last episode of Press Corner for 2024, and we look forward to seeing you again next year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Yeah.
That brings us to the end of this episode of Press Corner. Hope you enjoyed it. Goodbye.